Everyone, it is 6:30, so we will go ahead and call the meeting to order. Mr. Cusick, would you please perform roll call?
Mrs. Best.
Present.
Mrs. Davis.
Present.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Present.
Ms. Harless.
Present.
Mrs. Hudson.
Present. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to our November 13th Board of Education meeting. Thank you all for attending. To my far left is Board Member and Board Vice President Kelly Davis. Next to her is Board Member Amber Epling Skinner. To my left, immediate left, is our Treasurer TJ Cusick. To my right is Dr. Bowers, our Superintendent, and Board Member Stephanie Harless, and Board Member Jennifer Best. My name is Nikki Hudson. I have the pleasure of serving as our Board President this year. If you'll please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, that brings us to approval of the agenda. May I please have a motion to approve our agenda as published last Thursday?
So moved. Second.
Any questions or comments? I know nothing has changed, other than we're going to just flip the order of recognitions. Would you please call for the vote, Mr. Cusick?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes. Motion carries. And that brings us to our first recognition of the evening and text that is small enough that requires me to put these on. May I please receive a motion to recognize our National Merit Scholarship semifinalists?
So moved. Second.
I assume there are no questions. I'm sure we'll have lots of wonderful comments about our students. Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Excellent. Motion carries. And Vice President Kelly Davis is, oh, sorry, Amber, you're taking the lead on recognizing our students.
I am, and what an accomplishment we are here to recognize tonight. As I read a little bit about the National Merit Scholar semifinalists, if all of the students who receive this honor could start to make their way to the front of the room, that would be wonderful. We want to honor you here and get a picture, so start to make your way forward. We are so proud of these 14 academically talented students who are being recognized tonight as National Merit Scholars. The National Merit Scholarship Corporation compares PSAT test takers on a state-by-state basis. Those students who score in the top 1% of their state, 1%, you guys, that's incredible, are the ones that achieve this distinction. So congratulations on behalf of the Board of Education. We are so proud of you and the entire district. Great job, great work. I do want to go through and just have the names. So if you don't mind, when I give you your microphone, if you could just say what your name is so we can all celebrate you.
My name's Rowan.
And what school do you go to?
Thomas Worthington.
Anna, Thomas Worthington.
Aaron, Thomas Worthington. Hi, I'm Sadie Turner. I'm from Worthington Kilbourne High School.
I'm Gavin from Worthington Kilbourne High School.
Aiden from Kilbourne.
Henry from Thomas Worthington.
Dylan from Kilbourne.
Evan from Thomas Worthington.
One more round of applause. Great job.
Truly remarkable achievement. Congratulations, everyone. And that brings us to our second recognition of the evening. If I can receive a motion to recognize the Thomas Worthington High School girls water polo team for winning the state championship.
So moved. Second.
Would you please call for the vote, Mr. Cusick?
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes. Motion obviously carries. And Kelly is going to lead us on our recognition tonight.
So I am truly excited to introduce our state champion water polo team from Thomas Worthington High School. I mentioned last time I went to my first water polo game, and if you haven't been, you must go. Sign up next year. I mean, it just is an amazing sport. These athletes put in a lot of work, and I'm so proud of them. So just excited to introduce them today and congratulate them on their state championship win. So they beat Upper Arlington 7-6 in the championship game. Last minute score.
40 seconds,
Sorry.
I think, wasn't it?
So just so exciting to introduce them, and I need the microphone. I'll be right there. Okay, so I'm going to call up Coach Olivia. I'm also going to call up Josh Almondson, the principal at Thomas Worthington, and our state champion water polo team. If you'd make your way up to... I'm so proud of you. All I know. Okay. So, extremely proud of this team, extremely proud of these athletes. And on behalf of the Board of Education, we all say congratulations on your amazing win of state championship. So, Coach Olivia here coaches both Thomas Worthington water polo and Worthington Kilbourne water polo. So, an amazing accomplishment as well. And a graduate of Upper Arlington. So yay! I am going to have Coach Olivia introduce you to this amazing team, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much. First, I want to say thank you so much for having us here. Water polo is not one of those sports that normally gets a lot of national recognition, gets a lot of attention, and in fact, when I say I coach water polo at Worthington, I get a lot of, whoa, what's water polo? So thank you so much for recognizing this, the hard work these athletes put in. For those of you who don't know about water polo, if you Google toughest sports to play, water polo is #1 or is tied with #1 with rugby. So it truly is a difficult, challenging sport. These ladies get up before school to come to practice, to work on their swim conditioning, before school 3 days a week, and then they practice after school on their water polo skills. And while they do that, they also maintain high grades, great character, and are leaders in and out of the water. So they truly are a special group of young women. A little bit about our season. It didn't come without some challenges, but those challenges made us stronger, and these girls rose to every occasion, every obstacle that was presented with them. And that was really good that we had that adversity early, because when it came to the state championship, we were down by 3 at halftime in a very low scoring game, where I think a lot of teams would be really nervous. But as a coach, it was actually one of the calmest situations I had been in, because I knew that this group had prepared for it, and they had done it before. They came back in the second half. They scored 5 goals on Upper Arlington. We held them 2-1. Leah Oberly had a 5-meter goal with 34 seconds left, and that kind of clinched the spot, clinched the state championship. And it was just a really exciting season to be a part of. And I just want to thank the district for supporting this sport and allowing this opportunity for these young ladies to be the best they can be in the water and outside. Thank you.
So we can pass the microphone down, and if each of you will introduce yourself, because we want to know who you are individually and as a team. So we're going to pass this down.
Also, I want to call up my 2 assistant coaches who are here, Amanda Morgan and Keeler Callahan, both Worthington Kilbourne grads. So I have 2 others who are not here, also Kilbourne grads. So we're keeping it strong. I know I went to Upper Arlington, but my amazing coaching staff makes up for it. So now on to the ladies.
Hi, my name is Leah Oberly and I'm a senior. I'm Katie Niebauer. I'm a senior.
I'm Camille Camrad, and I'm a freshman.
I'm Anna Browning, and I'm a freshman.
I'm Sage Carrier, and I'm a senior.
I'm Sophia Hoffman, and I'm a junior.
I'm Stella Whittam. I'm a senior. I'm Chloe Hale, and I'm a senior. I'm Leah Pierce, and I'm a sophomore.
I'm Gina Kowalski. I'm a freshman.
I'm Nora Kuzio, and I'm a 7th grader. I'm Sophia Price, and I'm an 8th grader. I'm Stella Bernhardt. I'm a junior.
I'm Mira Klein. I'm an 8th grader.
I'm Natalie Hollov. I'm a senior.
I'm Hadley Boone. I'm an 8th grader.
I'm Gabby Zimmerman. I'm a sophomore.
I'm Evie Hunt. I'm a junior.
I'm June Rupert, and I'm a freshman.
On behalf of the board, I do have certificates to pass out. Coach Olivia, if you wouldn't mind passing those out to your team. Again, let's give these athletes a round of applause.
So impressive. Thank you, Kelly, for sharing our recognition. That brings us to the visitors' comment section of our meeting. If you have classes to study for, tests to study for, homework to do, or whatnot, it is a good time to make your way out of the room. But of course, everyone is welcome to stay. All right, I'm going to read some instructions regarding our public comment section. Still can't hear? I'll ask them to turn it up because I'm practically yelling. Can you hear me okay now? Excuse me, I am using the microphone. All right. I will do my best to project, as we all will, and I ask for civility in the room. Regarding visitor comments, the school board and administrative staff encourage and appreciate community interest in meetings of the Board of Education. This section of the agenda is designed to hear views of community members about their schools and items on the agenda. Each speaker will be asked to address the board at the visitors' podium, which is right there, so that your remarks may be heard clearly. The speaker should give their name and a street address and limit comments to 3 minutes given the number of speakers that we have this evening. Consistent with our policy 9130 on public complaints, we ask that complaints about particular employees be referred to the superintendent and not addressed during public session. We remind all speakers that our district values and respects all people as they are, and that our district is committed to creating and maintaining safe spaces for all of our students and community members. We want to remind you that while we value your input, we also always appreciate it when you remember our values, refraining from using harmful or offensive language, and for sharing your comments in a civil and respectful manner. Please note that it is not our usual practice to respond to remarks during the visitor comment section of our meeting. With that, I will call section C of the agenda, where we will discuss policy 5223, release time for religious instruction. Contrary to certain comments that were made, we have not talked about how we will address this. So we can start by maybe each of us taking a few minutes to talk about where we stand, and then engage in a, which is always difficult at this table, but engage in an actual discussion based upon what each of us have shared. Does that sound like a good starting point? Okay. Would anyone like to begin?
I can.
You want to start, Stephanie?
Yes. Yeah, they're.
We'll do our best to project. Thank you for letting
the
us know.
acoustics are not great in this room.
Yeah.
Okay, let's all collectively take a deep breath. Okay, so I just have some thoughts, then we'll just take it from there. We have received, beyond the comments that we had in the room tonight, we have received a number of emails. So I know not everybody sees those. We read them all, we take them all into consideration. And so thank you for everybody that has engaged in this conversation tonight. Thank you for everybody that has sent us emails. Genuinely, we appreciate community feedback and community interaction. We don't always get it. And so hopefully going forward on other important topics beyond just RTRI, we will can expect that level of engagement, because it is important to all of us when our community lets us know what they're feeling. That said, none of these decisions happen in a vacuum, right? So people have referenced several times House Bill 445, and I'll come back to that, I think, in a little bit, but I kind of want to orient or anchor my comments around that, because this is not the most ideal time, I think, to be having this conversation, but we are having it. Okay. In general, my concerns personally are all around the scalability of RTRI. So we have heard questions tonight and emails around what happens when we have 10 or 15 programs. I think it's a valid question. It hasn't happened yet, but this is a new thing that we are seeing, and it is a huge concern for me as we think about what this means to our district. I also share some concerns around having programs that take kids, especially elementary school kids, off of school property during the day for many reasons. I think I certainly respect the fact that parents are signing a waiver. I respect their choice. I just know that it is our responsibility as a board and as educators to make sure that our kids are safe when they are in school. And I think there is significant risk, especially as we think about how this scales and the number of programs that we have. I think that there is also, because of the going out and coming back, a disruptive issue. And I'm actually much more concerned about the disruption for the kids that haven't opted into anything, and for the teachers that have to maintain this. I also want to make sure that everybody understands. I can only speak for myself, but I know that my fellow board members are equally cognizant of this, that it's not our role to make a decision based on any one program, right? Nothing that I am saying or nothing that I will talk about going forward has anything to do with what one organization is or is not teaching, or what any organization, like what their perspectives are. That is not my responsibility as a board member. We need to set policy that supports our district goals, to make sure that we have an equitable district where all students can reach their potential, full stop. So I'm glad we're having this conversation today. I do want to make sure that we have thoroughly contemplated any changes that we may or may not eventually make. I was not on the board when this was talked about previously, but I think knowing what we know now, knowing if we would have known then what we know now, we might have made different decisions, right? And so anytime we contemplate changing policy, I think it has to be done in a really thoughtful way and make sure that we don't, to the extent that we can, we avoid other fallout or the slippery slopes. But now I'm going to come back to House Bill 445.
Yeah. I want to propose that we each, you can, I kind of want to propose that we each talk about it separate and apart from House Bill 445. Because you can say you don't want to, but because I think it's important to note that regardless of what may or may not happen, what we feel like is correct for our district, because there's supposed to be local control when it comes to these types of issues. And that's what they're contemplating taking away. So if we strip the fact that that local control may be taken away in this particular situation, what do we feel like is right for our district?
But I don't think we can do that because that was kind of my point of
I'm going to come back to it.
We're not operating in a vacuum, right?
No.
Everything has that overhead, right?
My proposal is only that we talk about it first, and then we come back around and we talk about, okay, so now if we have aligned on what's right for our district, what do we do in light of the fact that House Bill 445 is pending? I don't feel strongly, Stephanie.
Yeah, no. I hear you. No. I hear you. I'm just not sure that we can have the conversation outside of that simply because I think.
But I'm not proposing that we have it outside of it. I'm just proposing we speak first about the RTRI and then about 445.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Jennifer, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I thought I'd go because Stephanie mentioned not being here when this policy was implemented.
I think you're the only one.
And the only one. So I thought I'd try to give a little history of what happened 8 to 10 years ago in this policy being implemented. In 2015, the board had not been through policy updates and decided to go with a new policy provider. We had 2 board members on the policy committee, which I was not one of those 2, but I did talk with one of those 2 today for quite a while, and an administrator on the policy. And we got, of course, thousands of pages of policy. It took the committee and the board 18 to 20 months to get through every section of policy. And our committee would look at the policy and compare it to what we had and what's new and what's different and what should be discussed by the board. When we went back and looked at the history, 5223, the release time was brought to the board for discussion. But the reason it was brought to the board was because one of the optional parts of it was that we would be allowed to give students credit, high school credit for the release time. So our conversations centered around should they get credit or not credit. I personally thought since the policy was in our packet from our providers and not listed as an optional policy, that it was something we had to have in our policy. And our discussion centered around credit or not credit, and we did decide not to go with the credit option, but the policy was in our packet. At that point, I don't think we had any students leaving for religious instruction, and didn't really think we'd have an effect in groups and multiple kids leaving. So that's just a little bit about the history that we've had for about 10 years on this policy. And
thank you.
Probably last year was the first year students left, or 2 years ago. We really hadn't come across this before last year. So,
thank you, Jennifer. That's helpful.
Okay, now my opinions. I'm going to say I pretty much agree with what Stephanie said. So I won't say too much more, but we have a big job to decide if it's okay to release kids from the school day for religious education. It's not our job to judge the religious education at all, but I do worry about the same things that have been brought up. The growth of this to multiple organizations and the disruption to the day, the safety issues. And so I do have my concerns about our current policy.
Thank you, Jennifer. Kelly, do you want to go next? Amber, either one?
I too want to thank everyone who has taken the time to be here tonight, to devote your evening to hearing this discussion, as well as the emails that we've received. I think I've gotten through all of them, but there were a lot. So, you know, my personal stance on this, and the more and more we've heard, it does raise concerns. You know, I understand the policy's been in place for many years. I understand that there is Supreme Court precedent allowing for these things. I understand House Bill 445 is, you know, just kind of looming here in the background, but at the same time, I don't know that we can just ignore the concerns that are being brought to us right now that seem very real, concerning safety and disruption. You know, I'd love to hear from some, you know, teachers in the classroom of, you know, the General Assembly who's considering House Bill 445. They're the ones that just not that long ago were talking about cell phone policy and how difficult it is to get children to refocus on things after interruptions and distractions. And now, you know, it seems like this, to me, is the same sort of thing, but it's, you know, there's a little bit of a disconnect from the General Assembly. So I'm not going to pontificate about that, but I just, you know, to me, it's the same thing. It's you're having students come back and you just taking them away from, especially like Stephanie said, elementary school age students. These are very, very young kids. And I don't, you know, this isn't an anti-religious stance that I'm taking on this. I'm a Christian. I consider myself a Christian, but I'm also pro-public education. And to me, we have a real responsibility as a school board, as a district, to educate our students when they are here for the school day. And that doesn't mean they leave for the school day. That means that they're in the school, they're around a diverse, multi-religion, multi-ethnic, multicultural community in the classroom where they can learn and they can grow, and they're not taken out and, you know, put in a very homogeneous community that it seems like that's what we're talking about here. So I'm kind of rambling here. Sorry, I had notes and I'm not using them at all.
You're good.
But I guess, you know, I just feel, I'm worried, I guess, about our policy and about the concerns that are being brought to us right now. And yes, we sat in a luncheon the other day, Nikki and I, and TJ and Trent were there, and Senator Brennan, Brenner, who is the chairman of the Primary and Secondary Education Committee in the Senate, said that this bill is going to pass in lame duck. So, you know, he is chairman and he has a lot of power, but he doesn't have a crystal ball, and lame duck gets crazy and lots of bills are moving, and whether or not this is the priority of the Senate president and the speaker, I don't know. If the governor would sign it, I don't know. The legislative process has a lot of I don't knows along the way. So, I don't know. In summary. Yeah, but that's, sorry if that was.
No, you're good.
Can
You're
make
good.
sense of any of that? Like
I
had a nice like scripted thing that I was going to read through and make sense, but.
You're good. I had planned on sharing that too, so I appreciate you doing so with regards to Senator Brenner. Kelly, would you like to share your thoughts on the policy and the comments that we've heard from our community?
No, I'm just kidding.
Not an option.
I don't have anything. I mean, I had things written down, obviously. This is challenging. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the engagement. We do a lot of great work in this district, and so many things could be newsworthy. So many things that we do here could be headlines. We just talked about, oh, I have a small voice. We're going to really try. I see you back there. We just talked about kindergarten and universal kindergarten. That's newsworthy. That's headline worthy. That's the work that we're doing here. We're doing Portrait of a Learner, which our academic team is doing tremendous work in our schools with all of our students, teachers, and staff. That's tremendous work that we're doing. We agreed, I think, during the summer to allow no more school instructional fees. That is headline worthy. That is newsworthy to me. We are doing amazing things in this district. We are doing amazing things in the space of our EL students, our special education students, our DEI work, and like I said, our Portrait of a Learner. So I just want to say, like, I appreciate this crowd and I appreciate the engagement. And there's no but, and there's and. Let's keep it all going and include it all. And one of our biggest things is policy. Policy is one of our major responsibilities. It is, like, when you go on OSBA's website, they will tell you academic achievement, policy, and hiring the superintendent and the treasurer. Like, those are big things that we have to do all the time, okay? So sitting here talking about policy is not unusual. Nikki and I just sat through a policy committee meeting for a good 2 or 3 hours to go through the bulk of these policies. Like Jennifer mentioned, you go through these bulk of policies at a time. So this is not unusual for us to talk about policy. We're here because we value public education. And I personally value public education throughout the entire school day. I just do. I was also not on the board when this policy was adopted. And I had concerns about disruption of the school day and utilizing our school resources. So staff that has to sign in and out. Again, we're talking about whether or not the numbers increase and how much of a burden that could be on staff and teachers. We just value the entire school day, right? We value recess. One of the resources that was utilized, like Amber mentioned about the cell phone, I think one of the commenters mentioned about cell phone, is about recess time and that time that helps social and cognitive development for our students. That happens throughout our entire school day. And the value that our students have with their teachers, their staff, their peers, how they learn from one another is valuable for our school day. So one thing I hear about when we talk to students and we talk to families, we're having a lot of conversations about cell phones. That's also another hot topic, right? Is consistency. And so I think the consistency that lies here is the consistency when we're talking about cell phones and distractions throughout the day, which is a huge initiative statewide. Chronic absenteeism and trying to reduce chronic absenteeism is a huge conversation that's happening statewide. And early intervention is also a conversation. We're implementing the science of reading. We're training our teachers. That's coming from the state. And we're doing that statewide. And I think consistent, so we're asked to be consistent about interacting with our students, giving them the best academic experience that they can have in our public school setting. And I think it blurs the line a little bit when we say, but for this thing, we're going to take you out. And that it doesn't have to be, it has to be consistent everywhere else, but just not here. Mm-hmm. And so what our families and our students appreciate is consistency. And so what are we doing? You know, how are we being consistent? And that's all I'm going to say about that. Right there.
Thank you, Kelly. So I try to take notes, and I'm going to try not to duplicate things that have already been shared. So scalability, which I wholeheartedly agree with what has been shared. It's very difficult to imagine the fact that it's not burdensome on our administrators and our teachers and staff. Now imagine multiple programs, right? I think anyone who thinks that you can support bringing students out of school without requiring some degree of effort, energy, and resources by those who are within the school have maybe never been in an elementary school. Those kids don't get up from their room and leave and check themselves out, whatnot. Put their coats on, exactly. You all spoke about disruption as well. Again, I think that actually is not just disruption as it exists right now, but disruption tied to scalability as well. So you may have children who are coming back and talking about the things that they have experienced and learned while they were away. Imagine that scaled out to multiple different programs and the disruption that that would cause in the afternoon when academics are supposed to be occurring. Kelly, you spoke to the value of recess and social emotional learning, and that's tied in. I don't remember if everyone, I know some of our speakers spoke to it today, but I expect things that come out of the State House that are mandated to be evidence-based researched, supported by evidence-based researched. And there's nothing that says that religious-based programs during a school day are necessary for the academic well-being of our students. And consistency and what the disruption that's caused by taking children out of the school day. I think the other things that I had written down, you guys hit on most of them, was just that there's been a lot of discussion about the value that these programs can bring to our students, whether it's LifeWise or anything else. And I want to say that to think that within Worthington, we are not already addressing character traits, we are not already addressing the fact that kindness comes first, is honestly kind of insulting. One of the things that our teachers hear on a regular basis from Dr. Bowers, from all leadership, is be kind to kids. We not only teach kindness, we model kindness every single day. So our teachers work incredibly hard to create environments in which our students are treating each other with kindness and empathy and acceptance. And I don't believe that we need outside resources to fill that. That's something that we are already filling and accomplishing on a daily basis. Now, with all of that said, and the reason why I wanted to somewhat separate the two is because I was planning on sharing what Amber shared. So thank you for sharing it. I was blown away in this luncheon on Monday in front of hundreds of people. Senator Brenner said 445 is going to pass. And I will tell you that for a hot second, and Amber and I actually talked about it afterwards because we were both in the lunch, we were like, well, if it's going to pass, like, do we just pause on the discussion? Like, not on the discussion, but do we pause on the decision and see what comes down? But that's not the way I'm feeling sitting here right now and having listened to our community members and read the multiple emails. I feel like we take the harder path and that we make decisions that are right for our community, which is what we should be permitted to do. With local governance over, that's why we have school boards, right? And that we make a decision that we feel is right for our community. I'm just repeating myself at this point. So, Stephanie, what were you going to share regarding 445? And thank you for separating the discussions.
So I am under the impression, I have not had this conversation with you guys and was not at that lunch, but I am also under the impression that it is either going to pass or will get tagged onto a Senate bill somehow.
I think it's Senate Bill 8 is what he said it was going to get tagged onto.
Right, so the lame duck is another 6 weeks ish. Yes, we would all love to live in a world where sorry, I will not lean back from my microphone, where we do live kind of in this vacuum where we get to make all of our decisions. But we aren't there. And
to be clear, we don't get to make all of our decisions. There are
but
certain decisions.
You know what I mean? I see the potential for a lot of back and forth to actually be hugely disruptive for students that are currently participating, for our teachers that are currently not implementing this. I I understand we want to demonstrate what we would like to happen as a district. I just, from a policy perspective, I don't know that we have that. I just don't know. I don't know that I see the value in pushing this forward without waiting to see what happens and taking that time to then figure out how, if we are asked to do this by the state, how we do it in the safest way possible. Right? Because, go ahead.
You explain that last part. I just didn't follow you.
So if this goes forward, if 445 goes forward and we maintain this policy, we do have the opportunity, as one or more speakers said, to make sure that our policy at least puts some guardrails on to the extent that we can to make sure that when these programs are implemented, our students are as safe as possible, or it's as scalable as possible, or whatever. We are going to have to look at that, right? We're going to have to look at that part of the policy.
100%. I also would want our community to know that as it currently stands, we've done some of that. So
sure,
we only allow them to leave during lunch and recess. And so I just don't want people thinking that we haven't done any.
No, that was not what I was implying, certainly. So thank you for clarifying that. I am hard pressed to see what this 6 weeks does us, honestly, to rescind it and then without just seeing what happens.
Do you find there to be any value in whether it's rescinding it, whether it's a resolution, whether it's whatever it is, but sending a clear message to our representatives?
Yes. I think that is probably outside of this conversation. It
can or it can't be. I mean, we can continue to just first talk about how we feel about 445, and then we can, if the group would like to talk about, if we as a group land on not moving forward with the discussion and waiting until we see what happens at the State House, then we can talk about whether or not there's anything else that the group would like to do. That's fine.
Okay.
Can I chime in something
Please.
here? I too appreciate the possible disruption that rescinding then reinstating. I don't think that if 445 passed, it would probably have an emergency clause. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
Like I said, it's lame duck, so anything crazy can happen. But there's the potential that it could kind of be enacted like the cell phone policy where we have a year.
Sure.
So it might not be as disruptive as what it kind of seems like it could be if this passes just in a few weeks, because there would be time before it would be put into place and we would be responsible for having a policy. So, I certainly recognize what you're saying just about, because I think at the end of the day, just like we're talking about the disruption in the classroom with RTRI, we don't want to rescind and then have disruption either. We don't want to be the chaos agents that are making this situation worse. And I certainly don't want to make our district, with Nikki's point about sending a message, it's a little concerning to make us a target. It's a little concerning to make us a rim shot when it, eventually passes. And so I don't know what, performative PR does there either. I think at the center of this, where I am right now, I feel like I need a little bit more information. I need some information on the legality aspect. I mean, contrary to what we heard today, I haven't talked to any lawyers. I don't know that any of us have. So I'd like to hear, there's a Supreme Court case out there. What does that mean with the policy that we have? I think that when we talk about rescinding, and the reason I sort of do see a little bit of value in it is because of the concerns that that have been brought to us with the existing policy as it stands. Perhaps we hit a pause on that, let all of the state law work itself out, give us more guidelines as to what a policy needs to have, and then we can kind of go back to the drawing board. So that's sort of maybe an argument to consider just hitting pause right now until we have more clarity from the legislature. But I just think, as we discuss it tonight, I'm not really advocating for any action right now. Like, I think we just need to get a little bit more information. I think talking to legal, having them, come here and maybe talk to us. I don't know. I'm throwing agenda items.
You can throw agenda
ideas
items
at
out
you,
there.
Madam President. Sorry about that, but that's kind of where I stand.
Okay, and what from a legal standpoint would be the questions that you have?
Well, there was a speaker, Ileana, tonight, brought up the making this a constitute or whatever she said. I have it in my notes here. Challenging this on the basis of constitutionality, right? And the fact that we've had it in place for so long, why now? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I just would feel a little bit comfortable before we made any real action, kind of hearing from some who maybe are experts on this. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Kelly, do you want to share your perspective based on 445? Oh my gosh, whoever turned that off, thank you. It's freezing up here.
And now you can hear me. So, I'm a process person. From a process standpoint, we agreed to have a conversation today.
Only a conversation.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And we agreed if there was a consensus met, there will be there's always, with policy, there's a first read and a second read. That second read takes us into December. So from a process standpoint, then you wait 2 more weeks to hear a decision. I guess I need time to process that. Like, when I think about our December 9th, 10th. 9th. I don't have an answer at the moment. I should, but I don't.
No, you're okay. What I'm hearing from, no, you're good. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm rambling now.
You're good. What I hear both of you saying, and actually, and Jennifer, sorry.
It's okay. I'll get this on. I don't know if 445 will pass. I've tried to talk to different legislators and I hear yes and no, and we just don't know. But I agree with the thought that if we rescind and then they have us do it and the kids are back and forth, that's disruptive. We'll know within the next 3 or 4 weeks what the legislature is going to do most likely, and it is quite a process for us to get policy changed because we have to go through 2 meetings and we've got only 2 left before the holidays. We have to have our policy committee meet and go over it. So I think I'd like to pause a little bit and see what they do in the next couple weeks. But I'd also like our committee, at least, and legal to kind of look at our policy and are there ways to tighten it up and, safety and the line about not coming into our schools to promote religious that's in there. Why does our policy company think it's okay, but our attorney doesn't? There's questions like that with our policy that I'd maybe like to tighten up.
That's another piece that, I was just gonna say that's another piece that we really haven't discussed, but that's a good example of something that I think we should, right?
Right. It's in our policy that we don't allow, and that policy was reviewed by attorneys, not ours, and ours doesn't think it should be in there as far as I know. So I'd like.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Kelly.
That's not in the template that we got from Neola.
Exactly.
So
well, see, that's
my assumption, and my mother told me never to assume, so hopefully she's not watching. But my assumption is that the board members at the time on the policy committee added that in.
Yeah, it's on the template on page 2 where we had to decide whether or not we wanted to give students credit. Okay, and then after that option, and then it comes to the end of the option, and then it says about no solicitation of religious instruction during the school day. So that option was deleted.
But that was kept.
And that was put on. So you're only seeing a 1-page template, but we had a 2-page.
Gotcha. Well, thank you.
So that confuses me. I mean, there's some discussion there on our policy and what it can say and not say.
Yep, I think that's important. And there may be other things that we're operating within the context of what we've seen, right? And so we haven't really, and that's what makes me uncomfortable. I feel like we haven't really contemplated all the variables that we might, this is really truly the first conversation that we've had. I know policy has talked about it, but as a board, I don't know that we have contemplated all of the variables that might be available to us should 445 pass. Or
because I didn't know there was a 2-pager. The template that I saw did not include that last time.
No, it didn't. And actually, even our representative said it didn't include the language.
Really new were our policy committee that I got this from today.
Well, I'm glad that there's someone who keeps papers from 10 years ago.
Right.
Keeps it online and can print it out for me.
Very good, very good. Okay, so is it correct to summarize by saying we all have concerns with the policy, we all have concerns with the pending legislation at the State House, and that as a next step, you would like the policy committee to get together and just explore and perhaps explore with our council, and maybe that's something we can all do in executive session next meeting, if we were in a situation where we were forced to keep this policy, what type of additional parameters could we put on it to minimize disruption, to increase the safety of our students, to address the concerns that we have articulated this evening?
I think we have to check that because I'm not sure we can address that in executive. I don't know that it falls under the rules.
No, only advice of counsel. So
right. We can't contemplate policy itself.
Correct. So 2 parts, policy discussion and advice of counsel on what we legally or cannot do. Yeah. Okay, does that sound?
Yeah, I will add just for 445, it's that local control piece, right? And that's challenging for me to support legislation that's going to dictate something for the entire state, right? That's not necessarily an academic thing that's going to, I have concerns about, we are elected by our community. We are elected to do what's best for our community. And in some instances, that's just not a blanket. So.
No, well stated, Kelly. Very well stated. Okay, so we'll get a policy committee scheduled where Kelly and I can, I actually think we probably need to get advice of counsel first, and then we can get a policy committee scheduled, depending on what kind of advice of counsel we get and any additional parameters that we may be able to put on.
I don't know that we don't need to do policy committee yet, right? We're just getting options, I think. Wasn't that the kind of the
I've heard
discussion?
both tossed out, so.
Yeah, I mean, unless I misunderstood, I don't think anybody is ready to talk about policy because we don't know what ultimately is going to be needed. Is that?
Like,
I mean, we can
kind of said, talk about how we can tighten up our policy. And that would have to be with.
Is that contingent on 445 though?
Somewhat. It's kind of plan B.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that passes.
Okay.
And are we ready to go with this tightened up? I mean, we really don't know because we may not have to enact policy for another year. They may give us time.
That's true.
So perhaps we can, go ahead, Kelly.
Do you talk about policy options before we're going to?
I think that's my question.
Well,
before we know what we can and can't do?
Yeah.
I guess I do feel like maybe there's value in doing it sooner rather than later and not waiting on. I mean, just are some of the concerns that are being raised, are they valid? Are the students, are the classrooms being disrupted? I'd like to hear from teachers, and I don't know. I feel like, and then if they are, then what are the legal parameters?
So we can at least start by getting advice of counsel as to what additional parameters we could put on the existing policy. Now, if 445 passes, whether it's attached to something else or individually as 445, we also don't know exactly how it's going to be written, right? We know it's how it's proposed. So I feel like it would be a waste of resources to contemplate what we could do with what's currently drafted. We would wait instead until we got it to determine what we could do.
I mean, I think it's
if
worth
we were
waiting.
forced.
It's one word, though. This is one where I just do not think it's going to change. It's a one-word change. There's no other.
I'm aware that it's from may to shall,
to
right?
shall, right.
Yeah. But again, as Amber articulated earlier, you never know what's going to happen in lame duck session. So I guess I personally would, I submitted testimony before the hearing yesterday. I was not able to go in person. I don't know if any of you were able to be there in person. You submitted testimony as well. Great. What we're hearing from our community is that you would like the option for us to be able to make that decision as to whether or not we have that policy. I would strongly encourage our community to make their voices heard at the State House. And if you've already done that, just to continue to do so that control over policies such as this one remain at the local level. And then we'll engage with, we'll start a conversation with our council as to whether we're talking about this policy or the one that may be required. If it's literally just a one-word change, what kind of parameters could we put on it to address the concerns that our community has? Does that sound like a reasonable path forward?
And you'd mentioned too at one point a resolution. I don't know if we do that. Have we done that in the past, or
we have?
Because I mean that could be something just to let the State House know where we stand on it, and outline some of the reasons that we've discussed tonight, and also compare it to the cell phone policy, which they seem to be in agreement with too, as far as disruptions and focusing. Yes. And so I don't know. I think there could be some value to just letting them know that this is what the Worthington community thinks.
I fully support that. And I'm even willing to take the lead on, based upon what has been shared up here tonight, based upon what we heard from our community and drafting something. I can share it out with everyone, and then you could bring your comments to our next meeting and we could clean it up and submit it. And if anyone else wants to take the lead, you're welcome to. I just didn't know that. Okay, very good. Okay, thanks for bringing that back up, Amber. All right. That brings us to using data to drive instructional decisions. Yes, the good stuff, the stuff that we're actually here for.
Good evening. Tonight I have the pleasure of introducing two of our districts.
I'm gonna ask Angie, let's just pause for a second. Thank you everyone for joining us. Anyone that would like to leave at this point, we'll pause our meeting for a moment and allow you to do so. Thank you again very much for your engagement and for joining us. Sorry, Angie.
No, you're fine. Just let me know when you're ready to move forward.
Can I just say that thank you guys for waiting, and we're all really excited about this part also. Also this part.
Obviously, I was too. I jumped right in.
Go ahead, Angie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I have the pleasure tonight of introducing two of our district academic coordinators to you. You know them, but maybe members in our audience don't. Mr. Tom Kazmarek and Brian Genius. Both of them bring a wealth of knowledge in data analysis and have demonstrated an exceptional commitment to empowering our team with a deeper understanding and using the data that guides our decision making. Tom and Brian have been instrumental in helping us identify and utilize the information we need to make well-informed decisions. Their work with our team has illuminated key data sets, including student attendance, state achievement tests, and MTSS support for both math and reading. They have focused not only on the data itself, but when and how best to examine that data to drive those meaningful changes. We rely on Tom and Brian a lot throughout our work, and tonight I'm honored to introduce them to you to share a few highlights of the work that we're doing in the academic achievement and professional learning team focused on data. Thank you, Brian and Tom.
I heard a clap, so I appreciate that. Thank you. We stuck it out. Woo, and TJ, you're welcome to cut me off at 3 minutes. Thank you.
We don't want him to.
Hang on, it's data. Greetings, President Hudson, Vice President Davis, members of the school board, and Dr. Bowers and Mr. Cusick. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you about how we're using data to inform educational decisions. As you have heard today and many times before, our district's mission is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. To achieve this mission, it's important for us to understand all aspects of our students from academic and non-academic sources as well. So our real work today, and to help you understand, is how we're empowering a community of educators who are going to change the world with our students. So thank you. I have provided for you, left it earlier on, a list of acronyms. I know sometimes in data world we like to use jargon and different language, but this is to help you get through there. I think I left one thing off, which should be a BLT, a building leadership team. I hope to get to that. But you'll also hear us talk about a phrase called triangulating or triangulation. It comes from orienteering, where you take multiple points of view to help you locate yourself on a map. So we're going to do the same thing with our data, is to take multiple perspectives of student and academic and non-academic data to give us a fuller, more rich context of who our students actually are. Data has a season. Just like football and the leaves and the holidays, it's not always available at all times. We do collect different varieties of data. We have put that together in kind of a summary chart to help you understand when large portions of data become available, and that they are the ones in the top chart are really the most inclusive sets of data, where we're doing kind of what we call universal screeners, where all students or most students are participating in there. And there are some other more boutique types of data that are targeted for specific interventions and identifications. So I will tell you, we are going to use some screenshots tonight. All of this data has been de-identified, so you won't be worried about any student data privacy agreements. Mr. Collett, thank you. And you won't be able to see or identify any of our teachers or students, but you will get to see some aggregate data. So the first piece of data we'd like to talk to you about is related to one of our district goals on absenteeism or chronic absenteeism. I would like you to, for a second, just to consider our classroom teachers that are trying to keep track of 25 young individuals, their coming and goings for 177 instructional days. It is our responsibility to report back when a student is chronically absent. That becomes very hard to track for an individual teacher. Our information system, Infinite Campus, does an outstanding job of collecting that data, but it's very difficult to use it to see a bigger picture. So we use that to try to help us understand chronically absent students. Chronically absent is defined by the Department of Education as missing 10% of possible attendance hours for any reason. And that, I quoted that because we did talk about attendance today for quite some time. I'd like you to know that, I got to go back one slide just a second. In the 23-24 report card, Worthington Schools reported 13.8% of our students were chronically absent. That's roughly 1,400 students missing about 10% of the day, which would be somewhere around 18 days or more each. Currently, and you can see this stacked bar chart on the left-hand side, You can see all those different colors represent different types of absences. When we talk about chronically absent, we're talking about any students that would fall in those orange or red bars that are labeled as moderate or severe attendance issues. So currently, right now, as we are able to keep track of this, that affords us an opportunity to do some early intervention and address things before they become problems. We also have the ability to highlight this in a more longitudinal view for our teachers. So they have the option to see, and again, we scrub this for students' privacy. This would be what a kind of a classroom might look like. You can see their last 4 years of attendance records, meaning we could possibly connect with a family now before it becomes a chronic absence issue. So having our teachers, where the boots are on the ground, aware of this information makes it way more actionable for our staff. We also can look at students long-term, and you can see a couple different students and how they have attended or not attended school over the last 4 years. This helps us, again, head off problems before they become more and more serious.
Our second example of how we use data in the district to inform decision-making focuses on the Ohio State tests. As a school district, we are expected to align our core instruction to the Ohio learning standards. At the end of the year, students in select grade levels and courses are assessed to ensure that students who receive a high school diploma demonstrate at least high school levels of achievement in English language arts, mathematics, science, and social studies. So typically, the results of OSTs are available to stakeholders through district report cards and are aggregated by passing percentages and performance levels. Each bar that you see here in the chart represents a different group of students and/or different sets of circumstances for those students. The level of data here is really too broad to make an instructional decision, and because passing percentages can fluctuate with those different groups of students. So to begin to make more sense of this data, assessment scores are often converted into what are called NCE scores. So this is that second chart that you see here. Essentially, an NCE score describes a student or a group of students, their place in line if you ordered the data. NCE scores are the foundation of value-added data that you've probably heard of, as well as student growth reports. But this information is still not detailed enough for us to make instructional decisions. So to gain further insight, data is aggregated into a cohort view. The cohort view allows us to see the performance of the same group of students through many years. Converting this cohort data into NCE scores helps us understand how the cohort is growing over the years. And I apologize, it's a little low there. But if you see downward trends, that represents students who are getting less than expected growth. If you see a flat horizontal trend, that means that students are getting expected growth. And if you see upward trends, then that would mean that students are getting more than expected growth compared to the rest of the larger group. And in this case, because it's an OST, it would be the state group. The bottom right chart that you see here actually is an example of a cohort that is getting more than expected growth over the years. So you get a feel for how we can tell how these cohorts are growing. While all of this is very helpful for understanding how we did overall, it still does not actually tell us how do we make an informed decision about future instruction. So to address this, we can further aggregate the data down to provide us with information on how classes or individual students are performing by domains, the big collections of the standards, or by individual standards themselves. Teachers can go in and they can look over multiple years and say, how are we doing with this particular standard? They can also get in there and you can look at it by items on a particular test. So for example, we can go back and look at the 2024 spring tests that just occurred, and we can see how groups of students or individual students actually answered the question, so that we can begin to just really deeply make sense of, did our instruction help them grow and learn, or do we need to change that? Our goal is to efficiently dig into this data to recognize discrepancies between our instruction and the end of course assessments to better inform our instructional practices. A third kind of example of how we use data and kind of pull all of this stuff together is through our MTSS process at the elementary level. The Worthington Elementary MTSS process is data-informed and designed to intervene early to assist students with learning or behavioral needs. The next few slides, I'm going to demonstrate in particular how we build larger district understanding of reading and math needs and then support that's being provided for that. So the first thing you'll see here is that to identify if a student might require intervention for math MTSS, we triangulate the classroom data, which is really like a common assessment immediately after a short cycle of instruction. Then we take our MAP data, which is the current level of student performance. We measure that 2 to 3 times a year. And then for students who do take end of course exams, we would include that. The data used in this particular example represents assessment subscores that include algebra, number sense, multiplication and division, and numbers and operations. You can see that as this all plays out down at the bottom, that there's an example of how all that data being triangulated has informed us that this student is a candidate for what we would refer to as foundational numeracy intervention. And that just tells us that we really need to do some intervention on their counting, their basic fact fluency, and place value. The data actually really does help us inform what is that intervention focus. The process is similar for reading. We would triangulate classroom data, the universal screening data, in this case Acadience and MAP data, and if we have it for the student, Ohio State testing data, and this would again determine a specific reading need that aligns with specific intervention. During the MTSS meeting, the MTSS team actually gets a view like this that is a summarized format that allows them to efficiently dig deeper into any student in the class for both math and reading. So they can just get in there and click around. After each round of MTSS meetings are complete, what we end up with are just some summary views so that we as district leaders can take a good look and say, how many students are in each type of Tier 2 intervention, and what is it that their struggles might be? Now, there are many more examples of how we could use data to inform instruction. Believe it or not, we could actually go on for hours, and I'm sure, Trent, I saw that. But we're not going to tonight. But we want to thank you for the opportunity for us to just give you a glimpse of what we actually are doing in Worthington to help inform our educational decisions. And so we're happy to answer any questions at this point.
I will start by expressing gratitude, and I have a specific question that I think would just help me understand how this occurs and how it reaches the classroom. So if you go back to slide 15, where you had that math analysis where you're talking about when you're triangulating and you're looking at the classroom assessment, the MAP score, and then if this particular student were to take end of the year or end of the semester exams, that those would be included as well. What gets you to the point where you're doing a student-based assessment like this? And then where does that go back to the MTSS team, or the creation of one, if there isn't one at that point? Like, can you just give me just a little more color around the?
So every elementary building has MTSS meetings 3 times a year.
Okay.
So every student, if I go to this view right here very quickly, and we'll come back to the other, every student, there's an opportunity where teachers can talk about the need if a need were to arise here. The 3 kind of points of data that I talked about here, every student takes some what we would refer to as a common assessment, and this is only at the elementary right now that I'm speaking of, that at the end of a cycle of instruction, we might call it a module in math, they would take some kind of common assessment. And that data is tied to standards in the Ohio Learning Standards. So teachers would go and kind of enter that data in. And then we would use multiple iterations of map data. We're not just going to rely on one to kind of say, are the common assessments aligning with what we're seeing with map? And then during certain times of the year, if the student does have that OST would also be a consideration for us, because in each of the sub-scores, they will get a above, at, or below on how they did on that sub-score. And so what we're really trying to do is use these multiple points of data then to say, is this a student who could have a particular, in this case, foundational numeracy struggle, that then we're not going to try to pick and choose what we think it is. We feel like we have a really good target as to, like, because this data tells us this, we're going to go verify it and do some very targeted intervention for them.
Okay, that's excellent. No, it's very helpful. I mean, I feel like what you said, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it somewhat starts with that MTSS meeting that happens, where the teachers are coming together and evaluating the data based upon their students and identifying either new needs or existing needs and how they're being addressed and whether or not there's growth. No, that's very, very helpful.
It's a very preventative process to make sure that every student is seen instead of waiting for somebody to come and say, help, I'm struggling.
It's fantastic. Thank you very much. Very informative. Jennifer, please go ahead.
Follow up, because it's pretty much follow up with what you had said. So the MTSS team meets 3 times a year. If an elementary teacher has a student and it's not one of those 3 times a year and she knows there's issues but not sure what the issues are, that the kid isn't understanding math or whatever it is, what would her process be if it's not near an MTSS meeting time?
So what I would say is that one of the things I think when I talk to teachers about this particular situation, I would always say, you have the art of teaching. You've been trained to be a teacher. So we should not wait for any intervention. So clearly, if you see something going on, the interventions that we have available can be used at any point. And with our coaches and in some of our buildings with our Title I math teachers, a lot of what you just described does happen. So we just dug deeper. You know what, we found out that wasn't necessarily the issue. What else can we do? And so there's lots of emails and conversations and visits with myself, the coaches, title teachers, special ed teachers, to really then dig deeper and say, what else?
Great, thank you. I think
Thanks,
that's
Jen.
it for me.
Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Thank you again for being here and waiting on what is a longer night than normal. I'm sure you're excited to get home. So I have 2 kids in elementary school, and my oldest is in 4th grade, and so we didn't have MTSS when she started, but my youngest is in 1st grade, and we did. And the information that is available to me as a parent, the different information at parent-teacher conferences, just because we have MTSS is amazing. So coming from the parent side of things, I love it. I mean, I'm kind of a data nerd, but I love it. So I will just give my kudos for that. So I'm going to ask a kind of odd question, but when you talk about how you go through your MTSS data and you have multiple checkpoints, it sounds like, and can tell me if I'm wrong, this is almost also a place where we can check for biases in the tests, like state tests or the standardized tests, right? If that's not aligning with what they're seeing in the classroom, then we have a data point that says maybe there's something happening there. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah, I would agree that yes, and that's why we kind of really keep talking about this idea of triangulation.
Okay.
Because one point, we could make some poor decisions with that.
Right.
But with multiple, we just feel like, are we really in the right space where we need to be?
And could that also have implications not for intervention, but for the kids that maybe are on that cusp for accelerated learning or whatever?
Absolutely. So there's a similar process that as we hand students from elementary to middle school to high school, and even in between some of those grades when students are starting to make decisions about, should I take an advanced science course, accelerated math 6-7, we try to give information that would help in that type of transition.
Okay, that's awesome. I love that.
Multiple points of data again.
Right, okay. Is the expectation today or eventually that all elementary teachers will be able to understand the MTSS data, or do we want to rely on those MTSS teams always?
Each teacher sits during the meeting and they're a part of all of this.
Okay.
So I would say that we've had our first round of full math and reading MTSS this year. And that obviously the more we do that, the better they will be with that. But it was pretty impressive for me to sit through that and just kind of watch the professionalism and how dedicated they were to understanding deeply what was going on with their students and the questions they would ask. It was great.
Yeah.
So every teacher is a part of every meeting. For that.
I think those are my only questions. Thank you again.
Thanks, Stephanie.
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you for the work that you do. It is critical and it's making everyone better because of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's your turn.
Okay, so my first AAPL meeting was this.
Thank you for making sure it was brought to all of us.
Yes. And I just find it fascinating. I mean, we talk about each student, and I really think this helps us get to each student. And you're empowering our teachers because you're giving them the information and having them utilize it so that our students can have the best academic experience that they need to have right here. So I commend what you do, and I thank you for always taking time. I appreciate this presentation, and I'm glad you guys all got to see it. I'm in awe, just to say, because I know how dedicated you both are, and just how our district is dedicated to this, and how much our students benefit from having all of this information. That it's not just a guess, that it's not just an assumption, right? Because we're not supposed to assume. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you both very much for joining us and for the presentation.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
Your 3 minutes are up.
Wait, I have one question. Wait. When is Science Day?
That is a great question, and that is January 25th.
I love it.
At
January
Perry-
25th.
Perry Middle School because of construction constraints at the high schools.
Sorry, I
Should
spoke
be-
over you.
High school?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
No, I was apologizing for speaking over to you. I wanted to make sure everyone heard. Would you share it again?
January 25th, 2025, Perry Middle School. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to reports and announcements. Dr. Bauer, you're up. You have 3 minutes. We're going to continue that theme.
I think I can do 3 minutes, although I would say that if you're betting on snow, January 25th now becomes a day because we often have had snow and Science Day. But it's part of science. Okay, so the mission of Worthington Schools is to empower a community of learners who will change the world. We do that through our 4 vision statements, and so we put this report together through those statements. Our first vision statements will engage each student with diverse opportunities to maximize every student's potential. At our last Board of Education meeting, Rob Messenheimer, our Director of Elementary Education, presented a proposal to shift Worthington School's kindergarten model to universal, no-cost, all-day kindergarten. And so the question on the table was, why make the change? And so Rob highlighted four major reasons for that change. The first was more access for everyone. We want to be committed to creating a more equitable school district. The second is our families want all-day kindergarten, so more and more Worthington families are choosing all-day kindergarten. This year, only 16% opted for the half-day option, down from 44% just 5 years ago. Third, we're keeping up with others in Central Ohio. We're one of the last districts in Central Ohio to still charge for all-day kindergarten. And fourth, obviously super important, we believe it's best for learning and social skill development. So research shows that full-day kindergarten aligns with the latest learning practices, including Ohio's new legislation requiring curriculums based on the science of reading. So we're hopeful that the board will approve this with the passage of the 5-year financial forecast, which is at our next board meeting on November 25th, and registration for kindergarten next year will begin on January 6th. Our second vision statements will provide a safe environment where every student can grow intellectually, emotionally, socially, and physically. I just want to say that we really appreciate how each of our schools works hard to make Veterans Day a meaningful school day. So Veterans Day was earlier this week. Each of our schools really go together to honor our veterans. It's a tradition that holds great meaning for our district and our community. The day allows us to express our gratitude to the individuals who have served in our nation's armed forces. It also provides an opportunity for students to connect with history and values that shape our country. And really what's cool is that it engages with veterans in our community, but that includes parents, grandparents, and local community members, and really pulls all of those things together in our public schools. And so we just want to appreciate the work that our schools do to honor our veterans. Our third vision statements will provide consistent communication and promote dialogue with our community. Last week, it's been 2 weeks ago now, we successfully conducted our first Sustainability Committee meeting. After introductions, the group dove right into brainstorming exercise to identify various sustainability practices that we should discuss and consider under the categories of reduce, reuse, and recycle. We also had a presentation by one of our committee members about the Central Ohio Solid Waste Authority's Recycling Champions program. The program provides educational materials on recycling and grant funding for recycling containers. The next meeting is set for November 20th, and the team's going to continue discussing the identified practices and begin to divide them into 3 phases of implementation: immediate, short-term, and long-term. As we discuss each sustainability practice, we're always considering if the results are measurable, achievable, are the practices cost neutral, or can they be offset by grant funding in the programs, and can they involve student and staff participation. So we're excited that the Sustainability Committee is off and running, and we're excited to see where that goes next meeting on November 20th. And then fourth, we'll be responsible and transparent with our community resources. School was closed for voting last week on November 5th. All Worthington teachers participated in a day of learning on November 5th focused on executive functioning skills. So there was significant feedback from our teachers on executive functioning's most valuable aspect. Overall, the workshop, our teachers said, the workshop was recognized for its practical application, collaborative opportunities, engaging format, and met a range of experience levels and grade focuses. So of 582 responses, almost all of them, 99%, said they would implement the information into their professional practice within the semester or sooner. So we appreciate the work of Kelly and the AAPL team in making the 5th a valuable day of learning for our teachers. I tried to talk fast to get under 3 minutes. I don't think I got there.
It's all good.
That's
Thank
the
you.
report, President Hudson.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bowers. Really excited to hear about the Sustainability Committee as well, but all good information. Any questions or comments, anyone? Okay. Mr. Cusick?
I'll follow my own protocol there.
Should I start the timer?
I sound like a broken record, but we have talked a lot about pending legislation tonight on academic aspects. We also have to keep in mind that a lot of the luncheon that we attended discussed potential financial lame duck legislation. I got the feeling that any kind of property tax reform that came out of lame duck would be a targeted relief type of situation, which we would advocate for. But, you know, a broad-based property tax change, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the forecast next meeting, but would have a significant impact on us. So while we are monitoring all these other bills, we do have to continue to monitor potential financial legislation coming out. The monthly report for October has been distributed and posted on our website. I won't go into it until next week, but it shows, continually shows what we're going to talk about in our revised 5-year forecast: slightly lower property tax revenue, slightly higher interest income, and slightly under in wage income or wage expense. On the construction front, our contingency continues to be in a good place, although as we progress down the project now, things get naturally tighter, but I still believe we are in a good place in terms of reserve and contingency. And then lastly, I was invited by the city of Worthington to attend with them the One Columbus Ed 411 seminar, which is it focuses on economic development around the 11 county region. So the city of Worthington reached out to us. I agreed to attend. It is December 6th. There's a couple of national speakers. December 6th is also my birthday, so nothing like talking economic development on my birthday. That is all.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? We'll note your birthday too. All right, we are on to board committee reports and announcements. Kelly, do you want to go first?
I just have a couple things. The first thing we did Jennifer and I met with TJ and Dr. Bowers for our finance committee. So just ahead of the 5-year forecast and getting some updates on that information, which TJ will expand on during our next meeting. The next day, I had policy with Nikki and again, Dr. Bowers. It was a really large update, and so there's still a lot of updating to do. Tracy, usually, I don't remember if we've done a really large update since Amber and Stephanie have been here, but what Tracy will do graciously is give us a chart, and it outlines what the recommendation was and if we need to have any discussion at the table. So you'll be able to see a little bit of a breakdown in addition to seeing the actual policy and the changes in the recommendations. But, you know, things that we will have to postpone for more information, there'll be a real snapshot that you'll be able to see. So she will provide that, but we'll do the first read of those policies at the next meeting. Then I attended the student feedback session at Linworth with Jennifer. So they just talked a lot about their appreciation for Linworth. The smaller class sizes, the transition throughout the day. I heard a lot of like not having to immediately go to your next class, that you have a little bit of time to kind of decompress before you go to the next instruction, and just time that they get to be able to connect with their teachers. And they also talked a lot about communication and how there are different areas of communication. So while we heard at Thomas a lot of, please don't send me an email, not that they said that, but like email is less receptive, right? But at Linworth, they seem to read their email more, right? But they also have meetings throughout the week, and then they have a board. So they have different ways of communication, and they all seem to land well with them. Let's see. We talked about cell phones because, you know, it's a hot topic. And so there was differing opinions about whether they should be completely gone or whether they should be able to have them during their downtime. And what I appreciated from that, I appreciate the information because we're going to have to develop policy. But I mostly appreciated that they had a difference of opinion and they were so respectful and kind throughout that discussion. And you can see that the person that was speaking, the person that was actively listening, and they were able to have that exchange. It was impressive to see. And then last thing was I went to the OSBA conference. I didn't make it yesterday, but yesterday was Tuesday, but I was there Sunday and Monday, and just lots of notes, I'm sure those of you who were there. Just lots of different sessions, and so once I comb through my notes, I will give a better report next time. But I did have a board member come up to me from a district here in Ohio that asked about kindergarten and asked about our conversation about universal kindergarten. And so it was just really helpful to be able to have that conversation with him and say, you can listen to our meeting on this particular date, and to give more information. And he was very interested in that. So that was nice to do. It was nice to see some admin there too. So that's all I have.
Excellent. Thanks, Kelly. Amber, would you like to go next?
Sure. So, since I am the legislative liaison and lame duck has begun, I thought I would maybe start with that. And just a few of the top lines just from recently, we talked about 445. It's only a change of a single word from may to shall, and it requires school boards to create a policy on addressing school policies for release for religious instruction. So at the meeting, which was, what is today, Wednesday? This is such a weird week with the school board meeting on Wednesday night. But yesterday, Chair Manning limited the in-person opponent testimony to 3 witnesses. The room was so packed, they had to move to a bigger room. They had so much written opposition testimony that they are still uploading them to the website, I'm being told. That was a few hours ago, but you can go and you can read everything. You can also read the proponent testimony. It's all on the legislature's website. If you need any help navigating that, I'm happy to help because I am fairly good at it at this point. But they, the Chair Manning mentioned, and we talked about this already, how the House doesn't plan to move the bill. It's going to be the Senate taking the lead. And that was discussed at the school board. So the Ohio Senate was on the floor today, 5 sessions. Scheduled through the end of the year. The Ohio House is going to return on the 20th, which I think is next Wednesday, 4 session dates through the end of the year. OSBA is tracking approximately 190 education-related bills that may see movement during lame duck. So I do not have a summary of all 190 of those bills, but I did email the OSBA because I would like to see kind of a list. I know they have some information on their website, but I wondered if they had just a simpler list to share with you all. So if I get that, I can throw it on the Google Drive.
Hey, Amber, Senate Bill 104 went to the governor, or is on the way to the governor, right? Did that happen today?
So that's what I was going to say,
Okay,
yes.
sorry.
So lame duck, it takes good bipartisan legislation, amends it into pretty much unrecognizable policy a lot of times. So 104, Senate was on the floor today. First time the Senate's been on the floor in months, and they rolled an amendment with the bathroom bill. If you all are familiar with that, it's banning transgender students from using bathrooms and locker rooms that match up with their gender identity. They rolled that, the House had offered an amendment, and they rolled that into the bipartisan bill in the Senate, and that was intended to improve the College Credit Plus program. But now the bathroom bill's in there too, so many of the bipartisan sponsors, many of the Democratic sponsors who had been on that College Credit Plus bill withdrew their names, but it passed 24/7, now heads to Governor DeWine's desk for signature. So, that's another opportunity as we're talking about, these ways that we can engage with our state legislative counterparts and make our voices heard on issues that, affect our students and our community. Governor DeWine's office many times hears from people that, want him to take a stand one way or another on not signing something or signing something. So that's an opportunity to advocate for our students if you all are interested in doing that, either as a full board to co-sign something or individually. But that is heading to the desk, and I can't remember how many days he has to sign, but if he doesn't sign in so many days, it just goes into effect. So, but go ahead. And then the last thing I was going to share legislative update-wise is beginning in January, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, how OSBA was kind of revamping their legislative liaison engagement, because right now it's just a simple email that goes out. It's not very in-depth. They miss a lot, in my opinion. So they're going to cease the monthly publication that they send to the legislative liaisons, replace it with a monthly Zoom meeting. And that meeting will allow for more of a conversation, more of a back and forth when you have real questions, then the OSBA can answer that. So that can be something that starts in January, and happy to attend those and then report back on what happens each month with that. But that is my update as far as legislative liaison stuff. Did you have a question? No?
I'm saying I love that.
Oh, okay. And then other things I've been doing this couple weeks, TAC meeting. My takeaway from that, the thing that I have in my notes is TJ says we've never been in as strong a position as we are now. And so I just circled that and started in my notebook, and feel like, as we go forward with some of the decisions we have to make, that's just kind of something that I'm just going to keep in the back of my mind, but also, recognizing that that's not a permanent position that is, not affected by decisions that we make. So, but I think it's a nice thing to hear. I had a student listening session at Thomas with Jennifer, and we talked about cell phones as well. The takeaway from those students, they were very against a total ban. And I feel like that's what we've heard in many of these student listening sessions. But their logic was that, their family contacts them throughout the day. And one thing that I don't know that I've heard another student say, but I think is right, just based on my daughters and the text messages they get throughout the day too, they hear a lot from their coaches and their teammates for things that are going to happen after school. So a lot of times, it's a last minute thing, and my daughters will be running out the door. I'm like, where are you going? And they're like, oh, well, it's on the band app that we have practice at this time instead of this time. And I'm like, I haven't even had a chance to look at that, but they're keeping up on it. So I thought that was a really good point that I hadn't considered in the past. And then they also said that student council at Thomas had an opportunity to engage with the construction crew, which I thought was really, a great opportunity for them to have that opportunity to talk to adults that are sort of in that field and get to know more about the project. And but that was, always fun to talk to our students. And then Capitol Conference, I was kind of like going through my notes as we were sitting here trying to summarize sort of some of the things that I went to a session on the vouchers and the lawsuit that we are a part of. One of the things that came up in that session, which was packed, there were a lot of people in there. It got a little animated, I guess I will say, during times. But one of the things that was brought up was the possibility of like a ballot initiative or something to run alongside parallel with this lawsuit. So that was interesting and something that I thought, and that's seen some success in other states. I know Kentucky was one of them. I can't remember. There were a few others that they mentioned. But so that was an idea that was floated and seemed to have a lot of, interest in the room at least. So something to keep an eye out for. And then, I don't know. I'll have to go through my notes too. I have pages and pages here. But it was a really good conference. I wasn't able to go yesterday either, so I missed the legislative update, which was yesterday morning. But got in 2 full days on Sunday and Monday. So it was a good opportunity. I appreciate the chance to go to that. That's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Stephanie, would you like to go next?
Sure. I have very limited updates. I have done some student listening sessions, and I think everybody's covered that. Good conversations about cell phones. The one thing I will say is that I was really impressed when I was at Thomas at the way that students were able to have some really difficult conversations or say some difficult things and feel comfortable in the room saying them. I was very impressed by that. And I love that we give the opportunity for these kids to give us feedback, but also to have an experience in that setting. Also went to PTAC, what Amber said. We talked about, I will say it's important, I think, that everybody in the room that is thinking about the numbers was also very supportive of all-day kindergarten. So just another group that was supporting that. And that's, I think, all I have.
Well, I enjoyed the 2 student feedback meetings, and Amber and Kelly have talked about it. The students at both were very open and talkative, so they were good meetings. Finance committee was great with Kelly and TJ, and Kelly asked so many good questions. It's always really interesting, and I still learn a lot at those meetings, so it was good. And the library, of course, is working on their trustee search, doing interviews. Their board meeting is next week. They will select their two because one is moving and resigning, so they will have two, and we will try to get you all information on who they chose and why before you come to our next meeting, and we'll be voting on it. And that is it for me.
Excellent. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Stephanie. So I had the student listening session with Stephanie at Thomas. I echo your comments. One of the things I was impressed with is that they not only raise issues, but also bring solutions to the table. And I think that anyone who's been through bias training recognizes that overcoming implicit biases takes time, right? And sometimes you have to go through training multiple times to really hone in on things that you might not have gotten the first time. And that was one of the suggestions that one of the students raised that they thought would be helpful. Not knowing that our teachers had already done it, but even if they have already done it, it's something that there's value in doing again. And then I also attended the Capitol Conference, and then I also attended today the Worthington Education Foundation meeting. They would like to be on our agenda for our next meeting to share with us the grants that they are awarding. And I think what we've previously done is had them at the beginning, like towards that recognition portion, where they can actually award the grants during kind of formally in person award them during the meeting. So really exciting, you guys, that they have just obviously recently relaunched, and they received 21 grants from 11 different schools. 16 of them met the criteria for the timeline and approval criteria and were able to be moved on and considered by the committee. And then 8 of those were accepted. So I'm not gonna steal their thunder, and I'm gonna let them share the details on those grants, but really exciting, both to see the work that is being, the out-of-box thinking that's being contemplated by our teachers, the work that's being planned there, and the support that's being given by the WEF for that work. So we'll put them on the agenda for next meeting, and I think that was my full update as well. That brings us to approval of minutes. If I could receive a motion to approve the minutes. No, that's your motion. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Presented in enclosure, eat one. Sorry, TJ.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments regarding the minutes? I was just trying to move us along.
Appreciate that.
Would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes. Motion carries. That brings us to the consent agenda. Dr. Bowers.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve the consent agenda. The consent agenda is items F2 through F10 on the agenda. F2 through F10, please.
So moved. Second.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G1. Item G1 is the acceptance of the donations that are listed on your agenda. Item G1, please.
So moved.
Second. Questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G2. Item G2 is an easement and right-of-way with American Electric Power for the new natatorium. So item G2, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G3. Item G3 is the recommended motion to approve the continued enrollment of a Thomas Worthington High School senior whose guardians have moved from the school district. Item G3, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Please call for the vote.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. I'd like to recommend that the Board of Education approve item G4. Item G4 is authorization for the treasurer to advertise for bids in accordance with sections 3313.46 of the Ohio Revised Code for the capital improvement projects that are listed in the attached documents on the agenda. Item G4, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, would you please call for the vote?
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you, Dr. Bowers. Any requests, questions, or concerns from the board? No, I just wanted to, I meant to, during my update, and Dr. Bowers has a little printout on it right here, but right now we have a book fair going on. Special education, sorry, go ahead. It was earlier tonight? Okay, so there's the special education was just tonight, but there's an entire book fair going on this entire week. Is that accurate? Okay, so, and I know that there's information on social media and on our website regarding that as well. So just plugging the book fair. Okay, so that brings us to our calendar. And we have 2 meetings remaining in this calendar year, November 25th and December 9th. We will have our 5-year forecast on the 25th, and we do not have a presentation planned for the 9th. I will share, unfortunately, I am traveling for work now on December 9th and will be out of the state. So I'm sorry that I will not be here for that meeting. Any questions or comments regarding the calendar? Okay. If I can receive a motion to adjourn then.
So moved.
Second.
Would you please call for the vote?
Mrs. Hudson.
Yes.
Mrs. Best.
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mrs. Epling Skinner.
Yes.
Ms. Harless.
Yes.
Motion carries. I know it was a long evening. Thank you everyone for attending and for joining us.